This is not a manufactured crisis. This is truly an emergency.
The president wants to build a wall so there is something to point to. There's no emergency.
Their hatred for Trump is more important than their responsibility to protect our nation, protect our borders.
The Democratic Party can't get enough votes to pass a resolution condemning hatred against Israel and Jewish people.
Would you support this resolution condemning anti-Semitism? Are you anti-Semitic?
She's not being given tough love. In fact, they're denying that it's anti-Semitism.
The man charged in the assault of a young conservative activist on campus at UC Berkeley pled not guilty.
Zachary Greenberg is now facing 3 felonies, including assault.
President Trump says that he will not be happy if reports that North Korea is rebuilding a nuclear site turn out to be true.
The relationship is good. I would be very disappointed if that were happening.
This week, I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'm going to fight this. Keep the faith, and we'll win.
Welcome to Fox and Friends, the world's #1 cable morning news show.
Don't be afraid to jump, though. If you're making a decision and it's risky, face your fears.
Also, face the fact that Sammy Hagar was much better than as a lead singer for Van Halen. And I just
than David Lee Roth?
No doubt about it. He wouldn't wear the tight pants, and that some women were upset by that. But I do think that overall, better singer.
So that's your metric for a good rock
Not
band?
mine. I'm just saying, I know both sides of the issue.
All right, let us know what you think.
Yeah.
FoxNews.com.
Yesterday on Ash Wednesday, our lead story was the crisis at our southern border. And in fact, we had told you about how the Border Patrol Commissioner, Kevin McAleenan, had appeared before Congress and said, look, our system is at the breaking point. There are these families that are surrendering at our southern border in groups of 100 and 200 and 300 at a time. And we are on track to hit perhaps 100,000 migrants trying to get into the country apprehended this month. Last month it was 76,000, and so yesterday the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was there to try to convince skeptical Democrats that there is a problem down there.
She testified for more than 3 hours in front of Congress, and she said no rational person would ever design an immigration system like the one we have today. Listen.
The projections are dire. The agency is now on track to apprehend more migrants crossing illegally in the first 6 months of this fiscal year than the entirety of FY17. And at the current pace, we are on track to encounter close to 1 million illegal aliens at our southern border this year. Our capacity is already severely restrained, but these increases will overwhelm the system entirely. This is not a manufactured crisis. This is truly an emergency. Very unfortunately, because of the increase in violence at ICE, when we have families with children, we have to give every girl a pregnancy test over 10. This is not a safe journey.
That is so sad. Girls 10 years old and up have to have a pregnancy test.
Everyone. Unbelievable.
What is happening to these kids on this journey? What's happening to these women on this journey?
Here's the thing. There's an attraction. You got to shut off the magnet, and you got to make it harder to get across. Word will get out, and the people stop coming. They will expand what we're doing for humanitarian purposes in these Central American countries. At the same time, start addressing our overall immigration system. What I think they did for the first time in a holistic way yesterday. And by the way, it really is upsetting, and should be upsetting for anybody to see the way she is treated, how disrespectful she is treated when she goes to Capitol Hill. All she did is bring the message on Homeland Security at our southern border where most of the drugs come through. But when the numbers start coming through, nobody challenges them. They seized 84,000 pounds of marijuana, 7,000 pounds of cocaine, 7,500 pounds of methamphetamine, up 25% from 2017 to 2018. We know where the problem is. We know they need more resources. Everybody agrees, including the New York Times, there's a humanitarian disaster brewing there. So why can't, since at the same time, don't put aside this. At the same time, our country needs workers. We saw the Jobs Council yesterday, the president put together, talking about the one thing they need is more people to work. So there's got to be a holistic way to be able to address immigration reform for both sides of the aisle, and they could both take credit like they did on the criminal justice reform package.
The system is broken. The laws are broken. There are too many loopholes. She appeared yesterday in front of Congress and said that smugglers are encouraging families to file false asylum claims because that virtually guarantees you're going to get into the United States. The laws need to be changed. We've heard that from both sides, and yet both sides have refused to do it. And now here we are, and Dan Crenshaw, Congressman from Texas, says, look, this time, as in many times in the past, this is a problem that needs to get fixed because the laws are broken.
The Democrats keep talking about the children coming across and how we need to help them, and I agree. The thing is, we have very different ideas of what helping them looks like. What we don't want to do is allow them to be used as tokens to get across our border, and that's what our laws incentivize right now, because they incentivize children to be brought across. That is your ticket. If you come across as an adult, our system still works. We can send you right back. But adults with children, it's incentivizing them, and that's why this is a humanitarian crisis.
That's interesting. So if you don't think it's a crisis about immigration, it could be a crisis if you're a mother, if you're a parent, and you see what's happening to these kids. They're using these kids. These kids are having to get pregnancy tests at age 10. She said, I'm ready to work with Congress. Congress has got to do something about this. Whether or not you agree with me or if you disagree with me, can we please sit down and fix this problem?
Well, also, it's important to point out, too, and I think justifiably, the Inspector General pointed out that Homeland was not on the same page as Justice, and that's why when Jeff Sessions comes out there and says zero tolerance, Homeland Security didn't even know he was doing it, causing a catastrophe and the separation of mothers and families, families and their kids at the border. So the Inspector General pointed that out. I got it. Having said that, don't spend an hour continuing to go over things to try to get more votes in 2 years. The other thing to point out, too, is a lot of Republicans are upset at the president, not because he is doing something unjust, and that's getting money through emergency action for the border. They're saying, Mr. President, if you don't do, we're worried about the precedent. Therefore, see, maybe instead of using your veto, we could get money from other areas and maybe get you more money than you needed. And stalwarts like Senator Capito of West Virginia are going to do a last-minute effort to maybe get the president to pull back that emergency action. We'll see.
And yesterday, their appearance on Capitol Hill was to sell Congress, because it's up to Congress. If they buy the emergency thing, that's easy. Meanwhile, speaking of Congress, the Democrats are divided. They cannot figure out what to do about some of their freshman members, in particular Ilhan Omar, who over the last 2 months has had to apologize for anti-Semitic tropes, and last week was talking about loyalty to Israel. She's spoken to Nancy Pelosi, but Nancy Pelosi has not revealed what sort of discipline, if any, she's going to met out to this new Congresswoman. But here's the thing. Yesterday we told you that there was a plan to have a new resolution, non-binding, read into the record at the U.S. Capitol, denouncing anti-Semitism. But now, because a number of people have come to her defense, Congresswoman Omar's defense, it looks as if that may not ever happen.
Now it's more anti-hate. They were changing the wording. It was supposed to be a resolution that was going to be taken to a vote yesterday, and then it was going to be today, and now it might not even happen, as you just said, Steve. Nancy Pelosi, she actually was in that meeting with the rank-and-file Democrats, and she was upset with them. She ended up putting the microphone down, and after she said to them, she said, well, if you are not going to listen to me, I'm done talking, and she walked out of the room. The president tweeted and said it is shameful that House Democrats won't take a stronger stand against anti-Semitism. In their conference, anti-Semitism has fueled autocracies throughout history, and it is inconceivable that they will not act to condemn it.
It's amazing, because Nancy Pelosi didn't miss a shot to blame the president. She said, to be honest with you,
sorry, I was like, that is not what the word is.
She says, this whole resolution, they want to make the Democratic Party as if they're not very united. The president does that. No, they're not very united. You walked out of a room. You're all over each other. The leadership is being trampled by freshmen that's fundamentally changing our foreign policy from the Foreign Relations Committee. And by the way, Congresswoman Omar should stop apologizing, but she contradicts herself the next day and says, basically, I shouldn't apologize. At one point, Jan Schakowsky, a Democrat and a close ally, pleaded with the Democrats to stop tweeting, at which point nobody did. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went after another Democrat, Juan Vargas, on Twitter, and then he came back and said, you could have just walked down the hall and talked to me. They are at each other's throats right now.
Well, speaking of walk down the hall,
I saw your son doing that.
Yeah, Peter Doocy yesterday, you were about to see some of his attempted interview with Congresswoman Omar. He talked to her for over 5 minutes, and he was very polite. At times she was speaking to her assistant right there, and he would wait until they were done talking, and then he would ask a question. She never answered any of the questions that he asked, but he asked all the right questions, questions that people want answers to. Here's some of Peter yesterday on Capitol Hill.
Congresswoman Omar, it seems like there's some confusion among your colleagues. Are you anti-Semitic? Congresswoman, can I just quickly ask, would you support this resolution condemning anti-Semitism? My only question, just would you support the resolution condemning anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry? Congresswoman, would you support the resolution condemning anti-Semitism? Congresswoman, would you support the resolution condemning all forms of bigotry?
And she never answered.
Kamala Harris, you also have Bernie Sanders, basically Senator Warren, all saying, well, you should not confuse a anti-Israeli policy to anti-Semitism. Questioning Israeli policy is not a question. I think she's doing both on a regular basis. And I just keep asking, why did Nancy Pelosi look at her resume and say she'd be perfect for the Foreign Relations Committee? How is she still on that committee?
Specifically, what Nancy Pelosi said, she said she's not intentionally anti-Semitic. Kamala Harris, she said...
she's anti-Semitic, just not intentionally.
And not intentionally, right. Kamala Harris said the attention on Omar puts her at risk for possible violence. And then Bernie Sanders had problems with Benjamin Netanyahu, said it was right-wing.
Well, nonetheless, she is in the news, but she will not talk to reporters about what's going on.
Some people are in the news, and some people do the news. And that's Jillian.
Absolutely.
You don't want to be in the news, right?
I don't want to be in the news, but I will do the news right now. And let's talk about R. Kelly. I mean, you guys saw this explosive interview. Embattled R&B singer R. Kelly facing new allegations. He assaulted a 13-year-old girl. The claims coming on the very same day of that explosive interview that I just mentioned, denying similar accusations from other women.
So they're lying on you. That's your explanation. They're lying on you.
Absolutely. I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this.
R. Kelly has pleaded not guilty to sexual assault charges. He is now in custody in Chicago for failing to pay more than $160,000 in child support. Well wishes pouring in for Jeopardy host Alex Trebek as he fights stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
I plan to beat the low survival rate statistics for this disease. Truth told, I have to, because under the terms of my contract, I have to host Jeopardy for 3 more years. So help me. Keep the faith, and we'll win.
TMZ reports the 78-year-old plans to at least finish Jeopardy's current season. Meghan McCain tweeting, sending you so much love, prayers, and support to you, Alex, your family, and the entire Jeopardy family. You've got this. We are all here fighting alongside you. Wheel of Fortune's Vanna White tweets, quote, the clue, he has the strength and determination to beat his cancer diagnosis. The response, who is Alex Trebek? My family and I are sending love and tons of healing prayers to you, Alex. And Jeopardy champ Ken Jennings tweeting, quote, one thing I know for a fact, Alex is very aware of how much he means to millions of people and how we will be pulling for him. I hope that is a comfort. Of course, prayers and well wishes.
That was Vanna White. That was sweet and clever.
He's been in our house for decades. He's like part of the family. All right. Meanwhile, on TV, a massive drug operation created enough fentanyl to kill everybody. A massive drug bust at that rest stop in New Jersey. Authorities seizing enough fentanyl to kill 10 million people, which is more than the state of New Jersey, the population-wise. Our next guest sounding the alarm on the nation's opioid crisis, saying that even just a couple of grams can kill a person. Chief Medical Officer at Acadia Healthcare, Dr. Michael Genovese, joins us right now from Chicago. Doctor, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing okay, but, you know, people are just shocked at how powerful these drugs like fentanyl are. You know, it just takes 3 grains, like grains of salt, to kill a normal-sized person. This is a big problem.
That's exactly right. It takes about 2 milligrams to prove fatal, and they seized about 200 kilograms. So think about the devastation that could be wrought with that.
In your business at Acadia, how big a problem is addiction in America right now, regardless of what people are hooked on, whether it's heroin or oxy or fentanyl?
Sure, yeah. It's a huge problem. 72,000 Americans died last year. So try to think about that. That's 72,000 families. Will never get their loved ones back. And we're seeing more and more fentanyl involved. Patients are getting this unknowingly. It's frequently packaged to look, it's pressed into pills that look like OxyContin or Xanax, and people are taking it thinking that they're taking something else and unfortunately overdosing on it.
Doctor, yesterday Kirstjen Nielsen, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, was on Capitol Hill talking about how this is a crisis. Drug-wise, the number of drugs coming up through Mexico from wherever. Is it a crisis, or is that just being overblown by the Republicans?
I think that it's a crisis all across the country. If you think about the amount of people that have died, it's now exceeded the amount of people that are dying in motor vehicle accidents. So we really need to get a hold on this through law enforcement, through treatment. And the good news is that a lot of the people that are dependent on opioids who are getting this unknowingly can get treatment for it. So we need to get that word out.
And that's why they come to you, right?
Yes, sir. Yes. We do have good means of treatment now. We have medications that we can use to get people off of the drugs to which they're dependent. We need to overcome the stigma of thinking that substance use disorders are a moral failing and let people know that they're brain diseases that can be treated like any other disease.
Absolutely. All right. Dr. Genovese, thank you very much for getting up so early today in Chicago to tell us about this terrible problem.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.
Thanks.
You bet. All right. Thank you, sir. 6:20 now here in New York City. Democrats keep pushing back a vote on a resolution to condemn Congresswoman Omar's anti-Semitic remarks. But Muslim scholar Dr. Quanta Ahmed says it doesn't go far enough. She's going to... All right, we got some quick Thursday morning headlines for you right now from our world headquarters here in New York. A Colorado county declares itself, and a New Jersey town is barking up controversy for dog owners.
Yes, I'd like to call in and complain about a howling dog.
That's the movie version. One town proposing fines for owners whose dogs bark for more than 20 minutes. Oh, this sounds good. They could also face community service if their pets act up. All right, that's some of the news, Brian.
Hi, Steve. House Democrats now revolting against a resolution to condemn Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's anti-Semitic remarks about Israel. In fact, it's not even on today's docket.
So why would Democrats drag their feet on this? Let's ask Dr. Quanta Ahmed, member of University of Southern California's Shoah Foundation and Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Do you think this goes far enough?
No. I mean, condemning anti-Semitism is a universal value. We all repudiate it, and I support that. I not only do that, I combat it, but it does not, this proposal will not rebuke the offender. It will not rebuke Ilhan Omar, Rep. Ilhan Omar, for her anti-Semitism, for her unique bigotry. There is no penalty for a future anti-Semitic congressperson. There's no ejection to remove her from foreign affairs committees. This is just a placebo.
This isn't a bad day. This has been her record when she was in the State House, all the way up until she got this job a couple of months ago. And look what Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, knowing he doesn't have the votes to condemn this because so many freshmen are sticking by her, he says, oh, let's broaden this out. Quote, we are committed to decisively condemning anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy, Islamophobia, homophobia, and the rise of hate that has taken place in this country, perhaps coincidentally over the last 2 years. In other words, let's blame Trump for this. So what do you think about how he's taken responsibility or lack thereof?
So anti-Semitism is a genocidal hatred unlike any other. It led to the greatest crime against humanity. I agree. I condemn all xenophobia of any kind. Anti-Semitism is different. I'm astonished that they're going to include the word Islamophobia. Everyone should know Islamophobia is not anti-Muslim xenophobia. That is violence against somebody, hatred against someone for their Muslim personhood. Islamophobia is invented by post-revolutionary Iran to shut down scrutiny of Islamists, of radical Islam, of any institution, entity, person. They put that in there. She just got more powerful because she can say the same remarks again. Oh,
I'm criticizing Israel. If you attack me, you're being Islamophobic. So now the rules will change. There's no debate according to secular liberal democracy. The debate is on the terms of the pro-Islamist attitudes. I do think the Democratic leadership, many of my friends are Jewish Democrats, are absolutely heartbroken. There was real anti-Semitism, not just...
Eliot Engel, for one.
Yes.
He's chairman of the department. He's the one who called it a vile anti-Semitic slur. This is Democrat on Democrat.
It's not just slurs, Brian. She's affiliated with boycott, divestment, sanctions. That is a militant anti-Semitic movement disguised as a human rights movement, which calls essentially for the eradication of Israel. She went and keynoted for Islamic Relief, which is sanctioned by the Swedish government. Tunisian, Bangladesh will not have Islamic Relief do refugee work with the Rohingyas because they're afraid of radicalization. Her actions, other than her words, point to Islamist anti-Semitism. The Democrats, thank you for condemning anti-Semitism. That's what we do at the Shoah Foundation. We combat it. But they are not exposing the real problem, and she is unfit to be on a foreign affairs committee.
Why are they defending her now? At first they were condemning her. Nancy Pelosi was defending her, condemning her. All of my Jewish friends were excited that the Democrats, the leadership, were condemning her comments.
Yes.
And now it looks like they're walking that back. They're supporting her, and the Democratic Party is divided. They're watering down this legislation or this resolution.
I can only think two things. Democratic leadership at the apex, Speaker Pelosi or our own Senator Chuck Schumer, are afraid, that's one, that there will be some consequences for rendering this woman's ideas pariah. Remember, this is not about her color, her veil, her race. This is about her ideas. And the other is, how much of the Democratic Party really subscribes to these views? Do they think this is going to be the basis? Right. That is a concern.
They're pushing to say questioning the Israeli foreign policy is not anti-Semitic.
So
by the way, with the 23 Middle Eastern countries there's one democracy that stands by us through decades. It is Israel. Why they go out of their way all the time to question Israel is beyond me.
Not only standing by the United States, but Israel provides religious plurality and freedom for Muslims and non-Jews in Israel.
Absolutely.
Criticizing Israel can be legitimate, but unifying, making it one entity, vilifying it on terms other than any other country, that is anti-Semitism.
All right, Dr. Ahmed, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. A lot to discuss. All right, straight ahead. Stunning new numbers on the crisis at the border, but Democrats doing everything they can to downplay it.
The president shut down the government and declared a border emergency, an emergency that does not exist.
What does President Obama's former Border Patrol chief, Mark Morgan, think? It might surprise you. That's next.
And why did this grandpa do the chicken dance? It's no joke. And the answer will make your day. Stick around for that story.
No rational person would design an immigration system like we have today. It's dangerous for Americans, it's dangerous for migrants, it undermines our nation's values, and it fails to uphold our fundamental obligations to the American people. Although we may disagree on solutions, I hope there can be a consensus that the current system isn't working and that this is an emergency.
And that's why she was there, to try to get some consensus. Let's bring in Mark Morgan. He's the former Border Patrol chief under President Obama. You saw Kristen Nielsen yesterday. She's trying to explain that there is an emergency on our southern border. The Democrats are having no part of it. What's the truth?
Well, just listen to what she says. And then also the commissioner of CBP, Kevin McElhaney, the current chief of the United States Border Patrol, they've all provided congressional testimony within the last few days.
And facts.
And facts. I was just going to say that. You're absolutely right, Brian. So not only, I mean, how did the secretary start off her testimony? There's a national emergency or crisis, and then she backed it up with facts. The commissioner did the same thing. The current chief, Carla Provost, did the same thing.
Mark, you say the policies are in place from President Obama. Same policies. We're just enforcing them differently. How is President Trump doing it differently than President Obama did?
So that's exactly right, and that's a misnomer, another false narrative. There's many laws already on the book, like, for example, what he's trying to do right now in the San Diego sector, where he is not allowing those individuals that are seeking asylum to just be brought into the United States, never to be heard from again. He's saying, no, you stay in Mexico, file your asylum claim, and then when your hearing's ready, we'll bring you in and adjudicate that.
You told me something in the green room that I think is really important. The things that's changed over the last 10 years is that there used to be Mexicans coming over the border and we'd send 90% back. Now it's not Mexicans because we changed our policy, and now it's Central Americans, and basically 65 to 70% stay here and they don't show up for their hearings.
So that's one of the key pillars that American people are being misled about. Again, in the 90s, 2000s, say 1 million, but 90% were being removed immediately, sometimes in hours. They were adult Mexicans. Now, we're on track this year to reach another 1 million. The problem is 65 to 75% of them are going to be released in the United States.
Yesterday, Ranking Member Mike Rogers on the committee, he's a Republican from Alabama, he said, we never argued about whether borders worked until Donald Trump wanted them. This is not rocket scientists. So the Republicans say it's a crisis, and as you're about to see, the Democrats say, really?
Have you given him the grounds for this emergency declaration in the context of what emergency means?
They've given him all the facts from the men and women working at the border. By my read of it, it is an emergency. It is a dual crisis.
The president shut down the government and declared a border emergency, an emergency that does not exist. Real border security cannot be achieved by building a wall on the southern border, blocking asylum seekers, or separating children from their parents.
They also were talking about the cages. They asked her, are children put in cages? What's your response to that? That were built during the Obama administration.
Right, and that's it's totally a false narrative. It's a talking point for the Democrats. They're not cages. They're actually really nice facilities. And there are chain link fence within the facilities, but it's designed so the Border Patrol agents working there can provide safety and security for the people that are there. And remember, they're only there for max 72 hours before they've got to be released.
So you have the humanitarian crisis, with both sides are seeing is a problem. The New York Times wrote about it. You have the drug problem. 80% of all illegal drugs coming through our ports of entry in the South, and stuff that we'll never know because we don't see it. So we can agree on that much. Don't you think there's time for both sides to get together and solve this problem and do it almost in the way we did criminal justice reform? And don't you think it's possible?
Congress could fix the majority of the issue in 15 minutes, but they refuse to. It's identity politics.
They don't want to give Donald Trump a win.
Look, from a law enforcement perspective, Steve, I can come to no other conclusion. The facts are overwhelming. How many more do you need?
Right, and you was there during the Obama years.
Mark,
the last
why are you speaking out? If you represent President Obama, why do you disagree with what's happening now?
Because the president's right. President Trump is right. It's that simple.
Right.
We have a crisis.
Right, and you don't necessarily represent President Obama. You just served this last year. You wanted to stick around, but the Border Patrol's decided they're going to put their own person in there.
Right, and that's okay.
Right.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the couch.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks
Mark,
for your
Jillian,
service.
Yes. Jillian's behind you, and she has some headlines for us. Hey,
Good
Jillian.
morning. Good morning to everyone. Let's start off with this story that we're following. The Air Force is responding after Senator Martha McSally reveals she was sexually assaulted by a superior officer in the military.
I stayed silent for many years, but later in my career, as the military grappled with scandals and their wholly inadequate responses, I felt the need to let some people know I, too, was a survivor.
An Air Force spokesperson saying in part, quote, "We are appalled and deeply sorry for what Senator McSally experienced, and we stand behind her and all victims of sexual assault." A Bible will stay on display at a VA hospital after a so-called bully tried removing it. A lawyer for the First Liberty Institute telling Fox News, quote, "If he wants to remove that display or any part of it, he's going to have to come through us." The group standing up after the leader of another group objected because it promoted one faith over another. The Bible was given to the New Hampshire VA hospital by a former prisoner. All right, you got to stop what you're doing and watch this. A semi-truck slams into a construction worker. Did you see that? Who was hanging above the road fixing a stoplight in Houston. Yeah, a driver's dash cam capturing the big rig plowing through at nearly 50 miles per hour. The construction bucket flipping upside down, leaving the man dangling above a busy highway. The semi-driver stopped and called 911 as crews got the man down. He is in stable condition. Lucky man. When a 4-year-old gets nervous at her cheerleading competition, her grandpa knows exactly what to do. That's Jeff Harville doing the chicken dance with McKinley Lester in Tennessee. She told her mom she wanted her pawpaw to dance with her when she got stage fright. Isn't that adorable?
The things you do for your kids, your grandkids, right?
I need Grandpa, and there he was. Luckily, he knew the chicken dance, kind of.
Well, I need Janice Dean because I got to find out the weather. Should I wear shorts today? I have no idea.
I don't know, but I'm coming over to your place later on because I'm in Huntington for
Wait a second.
book signing.
Book review in Huntington?
Yes, and Brian Kilmeade even put a sign up. So come to book review. We're going to be doing a book signing of Mostly Sunny, and it's going to be wonderful. You guys are from Texas, ladies. What part?
Nocona.
And what are your names?
Alpine and Amanda Lujan.
I'm very sorry that it's cold outside right now. But it's cold in Texas. Let's take a look at the maps, and I'll show you how cold it is across the country. We are dealing with a 7 right now. That's the wind chill, by the way. In North Texas, it feels like 50. Still, that's warmer, and I would prefer to be in North Texas. Looking at the west where another storm is moving in, and we will continue to track that over the next couple of days. All right, you want to come to Long Island with me, ladies?
Sure.
All right, let's go. We're going to go to dinner first with Brian Kilmeade at his home.
Right. Yeah,
It's going to be nice.
My complex.
Fantastic.
So look for Janice Dean tonight at Bookends in...
Book
review.
Book review.
Bookends is
Book
your
review.
neck of the
Book
woods.
review.
That's right.
Every major book goes through Book Review, a great independent bookstore right at one of the best towns in America.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Yay!
you get a big crowd out there, Janice.
Yep.
Mostly Sunny. All right. Meanwhile, the Democratic Socialist from New York has a list of moderate Democrats who don't embrace socialism. 2020 presidential hopeful John Delaney might be on it, and he says he doesn't care. He's going to join us live.
Plus, a judge just ruled that an aborted child has the same rights as a person. What does this mean for the nationwide abortion debate? Judge Napolitano on that coming up next.
This is the biggest legal story we're going to talk about today. In a historic move, an Alabama court is recognizing an unborn child as a person with legal rights, potentially opening up a brand new chapter in this country's abortion debate.
There's a guy, Ryan Majors. He's 19 years old, or was when his girlfriend was pregnant, now being allowed to sue an abortion clinic for terminating his unborn child against his wishes. He says that the baby died a wrongful death after his girlfriend, who was 16 at the time, had an abortion when she was 6 weeks pregnant.
All right, on Tuesday, an Alabama judge recognized the aborted fetus, quote, Baby Roe, as a plaintiff in the lawsuit. Here to react, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, this must have taken you by surprise too, right?
It did take me by surprise because the Supreme Court, regrettably, in Roe versus Wade, which is still the law of the land, has said that the fetus is not a person. Now, what's the significance of personhood? The Fifth Amendment says if the government wants life, liberty, or property from a person, there has to be a trial. So if the fetus in the womb is a person, no legal abortion could happen because you'd have to prove that somehow the fetus in the womb did something wrong. For that reason, as horrific as this logic is, Roe versus Wade has said the fetus is not a person. That's why, regrettably, this courageous move by this Alabama judge will eventually be overturned.
But Roe v. Wade is wrong in the definition of a person, because if a child is born, children are born all the time, a month, 2 months prematurely, and they are a person.
Steve, I've been arguing
Isn't it wrong?
I agree with you. But to Roe versus Wade, until it is interfered with by the court as the supreme law of the land, I've been arguing for 40 years that the fetus in the womb is a person. The fetus has human parents and all the human genome necessary to actualize into humanity. But Roe versus Wade is to the contrary. But let me tell you what this Alabama judge, this courageous Alabama judge, whom I don't know and have never met, succeeded in doing. Teeing up this issue so that there is a debate about the personhood of the fetus. And why is that important? Because in some states, like where we are now, where abortion is legal up to the moment of birth, a baby that survives the abortion is permitted to die. The doctor is permitted to neglect that baby and let the baby. Correct.
Something we haven't talked about too. This is the boyfriend, the man. Normally, the man can't sue if the woman gets an abortion because it's the woman's body.
You're 100% correct, and you're thinking logically. The courts don't think that way. The courts say the father doesn't have the right to interfere with the abortion. That's an obstacle to the woman's choice.
Can't you still have abortion and define a person before birth.
No, because if the fetus is a person, you cannot kill a person without a jury trial. And at that jury trial, you'd have to prove fault. But all of this is bubbling to the head so that the horrors of what happens when babies survive abortions will eventually be addressed by the courts.
And you know what the MVP for the abortion debate is? The 3D sonogram. That's bringing these babies to life at an earlier time every day.
You are so good, Kilmeade. Only you could call this an MVP.
Right. I'm trying.
Most valuable person. That's what we're talking about.
We'll see you on your show today, right? Is it?
Yes. Oh, my goodness. We have Senator Mike Braun from Indiana who says Congress should not be getting pensions, Congress should not be getting pay raises, and they shouldn't get paid when the government is closed.
Liberty File on the Fox Nation
at
app.
9:30 Fox Nation. Thank you, Brian.
Meanwhile, we did reach out to the Alabama Women's Center for Reproductive Alternatives in Huntsville. They have not responded. All right, Judge, thank you very much. You're welcome.
Meanwhile, straight ahead, the man charged with attacking a conservative activist at Berkeley pleaded not guilty, and we just learned he's no stranger to police. Why has the left or everybody else been so silent on this?
Plus, Michelle Malkin is here live at the top of the hour.
No rational person would design an immigration system like we have today. It's dangerous for Americans, it's dangerous for migrants, it undermines our nation's values, and it fails to uphold our fundamental obligations to the American people. Although we may disagree on solutions, I hope there can be a consensus that the current system isn't working and that this is an emergency.
And that's why she was there, to try to get some consensus. Let's bring in Mark Morgan. He's the former Border Patrol chief under President Obama. You saw Kristen Nielsen yesterday. She's trying to explain that there is an emergency on our southern border. The Democrats are having no part of it. What's the truth?
Well, just listen to what she says. And then also the commissioner of CBP, Kevin McElhaney, the current chief of the United States Border Patrol, they've all provided congressional testimony within the last few days.
And facts.
And facts. I was just going to say that. You're absolutely right, Brian. So not only, I mean, how did the secretary start off her testimony? There's a national emergency or crisis, and then she backed it up with facts. The commissioner did the same thing. The current chief, Carla Provost, did the same thing.
Mark, you say the policies are in place from President Obama. Same policies. We're just enforcing them differently. How is President Trump doing it differently than President Obama did?
So that's exactly right, and that's a misnomer, another false narrative. There's many laws already on the book, like, for example, what he's trying to do right now in the San Diego sector, where he is not allowing those individuals that are seeking asylum to just be brought into the United States, never to be heard from again. He's saying, no, you stay in Mexico, file your asylum claim, and then when your hearing's ready, we'll bring you in and adjudicate that.
You told me something in the green room that I think is really important. The things that's changed over the last 10 years is that there used to be Mexicans coming over the border and we'd send 90% back. Now it's not Mexicans because we changed our policy, and now it's Central Americans, and basically 65 to 70% stay here, and they don't show up for their hearings.
So that's one of the key pillars that American people are being misled about. Again, in the 90s, 2000s, say 1 million, but 90% were being removed immediately, sometimes in hours. They were adult Mexicans. Now, we're on track this year to reach another 1 million. The problem is 65 to 75% of them are going to be released in the United States.
Yesterday, Ranking Member Mike Rogers on the committee, he's a Republican from Alabama, he said, we never argued about whether borders worked until Donald Trump wanted them. This is not rocket scientists. So the Republicans say it's a crisis, and as you're about to see, the Democrats say, really?
Have you given him the grounds for this emergency declaration in the context of what emergency means?
They've given him all the facts from the men and women working at the border. By my read of it, it is an emergency. It is a dual crisis.
The president shut down the government and declared a border emergency, an emergency that does not exist. Real border security cannot be achieved by building a wall on the southern border, blocking asylum seekers, or separating children from their parents.
They also were talking about the cages. They asked her, are children put in cages? What's your response to that were built during the Obama administration?
Right, and that's it's totally a false narrative. It's a talking point for the Democrats. They're not cages. They're actually really nice facilities. And there are chain link fence within the facilities, but it's designed so the Border Patrol agents working there can provide safety and security for the people that are there. And remember, they're only there for max 72 hours before they've got to be released.
So you have the humanitarian humanitarian crisis with both sides are seeing is a problem. The New York Times wrote about it. You have the drug problem, 80% of all illegal drugs coming through our ports of entry in the South, and stuff that we'll never know because we don't see it. So we can agree on that much. Don't you think there's time for both sides to get together and solve this problem and do it almost in the way we did criminal justice reform? And don't you think it's possible?
Congress could fix the majority of the issue in 15 minutes, but they refuse to. It's identity politics.
They don't want to give Donald Trump a win.
Look, from a law enforcement perspective, Steve, I can come to no other conclusion. The facts are overwhelming. How many more do you need?
Right, and you was there during the Obama years.
Mark,
the last year.
why are you speaking out? If you represent President Obama, why do you disagree with what's happening now?
Because the president's right. President Trump is right. It's that simple.
Right.
We have a